Welcome to this Times Techies Webinar. I'm Sujit John and I have with me my colleague Akhil George. The two of us will moderate this discussion that we are having in association with San Francisco-based Titan Holdings. We are going to discuss AI first startups. We'll discuss what sets truly innovative AI startups apart and how founders should navigate industry hype and valuation trends. We'll also look at the opportunity landscape, explore sectors that are ripe for AI disruption. And for this, we have with us two seasoned professionals. We have with us Ritankar Das. Ritankar is an American scientist, AI researcher, and serial entrepreneur. And that's where he's speaking to us from San Francisco. He was born in Kolkata and moved to the US when he was just 7. He completed a double major in bioengineering and chemical biology from UC Berkeley when he was just 18. He earned a master's degree in biomedical engineering from Oxford and began PhD studies in machine learning at Cambridge before leaving to start his own venture. In 2014, he founded Titan Holdings, which today builds and operates AI native companies that reimagine critical industries, including healthcare, finance, education, and enterprise technology. The company's core strategy centralizes shared infrastructure, including top tier AI talent, proprietary data, and go to market systems to rapidly build and scale subsidiaries. It recently announced a $100 million fundraise for its operating company, Tala Health, which deploys AI co pilots that integrate intelligence across patient care, augmenting clinical decision making. Welcome, Ritankar.
And we
Thank
also
you, Peter.
have with us Ankit Bose. Ankit has been on our platform before. He heads AI at nasscom. Prior to joining nasscom 2 years ago, he was for many years with IBM. He is a thought leader. He has expertise in innovation and team development. He has also developed new technology and service businesses. Through his career, he has held roles spanning engineering, consulting, strategy, and has worked across continents and in sectors such as governments, utilities, telco, retail, and manufacturing. At NASSCOM, Ankit currently is dedicated to empowering India by encouraging industry to embrace AI and digital technologies, but in a responsible manner. Welcome, Ankit. Why don't we start this webinar? Ritanka, the first question is to you. You've built AI native companies across diverse sectors from healthcare to enterprise IT long before AI first became a buzzword. How do you define a truly AI native startup, and what differentiates it from AI enabled companies that simply layer AI onto existing products?
No, that's a good question. And, obviously in the past couple of years, large language models have come on the scene and that has captured the global imagination in a lot of different ways. But AI is a technology that, dates back a very long time. You could perhaps even argue algorithms that were used to decode um, German codes back in the Second World War was some early forms of AI, if you might want to call it that, or algorithmic development and computation. So it's using machines and intelligence has been there for a long time. In the roughly 10 years that we've been operating our business, we've seen at least three significant waves of AI technology. Um, First of which, was a lot of a big revolution in image detection and image related work. Then we also saw a huge boom in the various types of neural networks and recurrent neural networks and the like. And then most recently, the large language models. And what was interesting about the large language models was we largely went from being able to do predictive or dissective type work, like, hey, to be able to see what could happen or to take a big amount of data and classify it in different groups, to generative, which is to generate new data from these models, which mimic human thought and things like that. So, you asked the question about sort of what is a AI native company versus one that puts AI on top of it. Look, there's no one thing. It's sort of going from one end to the other. It's like asking the question of like, what was a company that was say an internet native company versus a company that was say in the 90s and the early 2000s a internet bolt-on company. There are many companies that transformed themselves that you wouldn't know it, that went from being, there were pre-internet companies that have completely, embraced the internet. There are other companies that did it in a very, in shallow ways, and were often outcompeted by their native counterparts, internet native counterparts. So there's no one thing, but it's really how much do you integrate the new technology into your DNA. That sort of goes to the definition, but it's not any one thing. It's a continuous set of things that you can do from one end to the other.
But you can distinguish between AI native and the ones that just put AI on top of existing products, is it? I mean, is there something more? What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, look, there are certain industries that have become fully internet native, for example. Take the newspaper industry, for example, used to be all the newspaper people used to get these physical newspapers all the time, and then increasingly, right, like you put it on the internet, you came up with other business models and transformed over time, right? And I do believe you can transform. You can transform a 100-year-old business through different technology cycles and end up on the other side. But every time these technology waves occur, some organizations do it and others don't do it, right? And the ones oftentimes, usually when these big technology shifts occur, the ones who are on the wrong side of that technology shift and don't transform don't get there. So you can always tell, like when someone's just saying that they're doing something, the users, the customers, the people who are in the weeds understand when something is just sort of not really there versus when it's really being done. Because it takes a lot of courage and a lot of culture resetting when these technology changes occur to really go after the core of maybe what made you successful in the past, challenge that to do something new. And that's why, a lot of times this is also a great fertile ground for new companies to come up and be successful because there's like usually a typical innovator's dilemma that pops up in these types of situations where business models also shift, right? Like, from being able to say charge subscriptions to becoming more advertising based is one example we saw over and over again in the internet era. In the AI era, you're going to see a bunch of transformations like that where value gets compressed in certain areas and value gets generated elsewhere, and you have to sort of move with it.
Okay.
Hmm. Is it fair to say that these AI native companies are just startups that don't need to transform themselves because they're startups?
Yes and no, right? You actually see some companies that may have been around for like some number of years that become AI native, right? So I don't think AI native is
Hmm.
necessarily the provenance of startups only. It's any organization that truly brings on the technology. It does lower the barrier to entry for new companies for a startup, for example, because right? Everybody has to learn this new technology and nobody is an expert in it. Nobody has a huge amount of like historical understanding and ability to use this technology. So it does make it easier for someone new to come in and build something interesting. But I don't think it's only startups that can do it. In fact, I would say many large companies are doing it, and folks are doing it at varying degrees. And I think becoming AI native is to fully embrace it and to insert it in all the different parts of your organization that can benefit from this technology.
Ankit, same question to you. I mean, do you see AI native startups emerging? Do you see existing startups who were kind of pre Gen AI at least are now transforming to become truly AI native startups?
Yeah. So I think I agree with Ritankar on certain perspective. Right? Again, a few more pointers. So I'll start with data point, right? Again, I think 24 end or first quarter 25, we did assessment and then we found that there were around 350 plus AI Gen AI startups in India, right? Uh, and I think we did something after 2 quarters that 350 become 890, right? Is that possible? Generally it's not possible, but again I think what has happened is a lot of deep tech AI startups, they've embraced AI and they have made their products AI enabled, right? Again, it's very hard to differentiate what is AI enabled and AI native. A simple probably thumb rule could be, if you are a sectoral use case, right, or sectoral focused company, you are using AI and making your use case more AI enabled. I think that could be enabled. But again, AI native could be something which is focused on AI elements, probably compression, probably optimization, performance enhancement. I think that is one sort of segregation we can see. The other element to that is beyond use cases, how you operate as a company, right? Again, here it is not limited to startups. It's again, far beyond startups, right? How are you changing your internal processes, right? I think I see a lot of new startups who have emerged in last 2 years using AI-enabled coding, for example, right? Than the old way of coding, right? Again, that's AI-enabled, but also AI native sort of, right? So they are not building massive teams for coding. They are using tools which are making their operations simpler, right? Again, same for sales, same for operations, same for FinOps, all of that, right? Again, I think that's how we see it. And then, as I think Ritankar was saying, it's not limited to only startups, right? As NASSCOM, we have been pivoting AI first initiative, right? As we speak, in last, I think 9 months, we have enabled 24 SMEs. These are tech SME companies, right? Uh, between 20 CRs to 100 CRs revenue to become AI first companies, right? Again, I think that's how it is. But yeah, that's a segregation we can see from Sujit.
And how easy is this transformation? If you want to become an AI native company, how expensive is it? How easy is it to just get there?
Yes, I think great question, Sujit. AI native company is first, starting from the top down, right? Again, it's a mindset change, right? You need a mindset change from the management, right? Again, I see most of the upper management at least is inclined and lean, but the next change is driven in the second layer and third layer, right? Second layer and third layer have to really believe that and start implementing, right? It's a journey. If someone so basis our experience converting age-old SME companies to AI first, what takes is you need real commitment from your top layer and the second and third layer, right? Again, the rest of the company will follow, but it's commitment, and typically 6 months is something which is very very short time for you to change your processes, realign things. But after beyond 6 months, you can really reap the benefits. Again, how we do it is in same what I said, two ways: AI for business and business of AI, right? AI for business is how you can use AI for your internal, operation processes, right? And business of AI is something truly native. What are you building for your end customer? That's how it is. Sujit.
Okay, okay. Akhil?
Yeah, Ritankar, let's get back to you. You operate globally across healthcare, finance, and education. Which sectors do you believe are most ripe for AI-driven disruption in the next 3 to 5 years? And what trends or technologies excite you the most?
Look, I think I think just like again, the internet is probably the best analogy. There's no one industry that wasn't affected by the internet. I think every industry somehow got touched by it in one way or another. I will say with where the technology is today, it is more likely to impact industries that have less sort of real world work, although robotics is advancing very, very fast. But today, right, white collar work is much more affected by AI than hands-on work, right? So if you look at the state of technology today, you would think any sector where there's a lot of information transfer and knowledge transfer happening as the core of the sector is going to be much more affected by um, you know by AI. Now there's certain sectors where it's a combination. Like think about medicine, for example. Medicine is a combination of very high order thinking work, like doing a diagnosis or identifying the right medication for somebody, identifying and aggregating symptoms, looking at medical history, all of that. But there's also a lot of very physical things, like literally getting someone's blood pressure measurement, doing a surgery. So a lot of what is sort of very interesting are going to be these combination areas. But even those are going to be significantly helped. I mean, even preceding LLMs, for example, increasingly AI has been used to, for example, find the right medicine for somebody based on their blood or other markers like genetic markers and things like that. AI has also been used to help radiologists, for example, find um, lung nodules and other things like that in scans, for example. These types of things preceded, generative AI, and generative AI just enables a whole lot more. But you can look at another sector like finance, where a lot of time is spent in some kind of drudgery of like spreadsheets and work that is done there. Um, what software was very good at was automating something that was exactly repeated, right? Like something repeatedly done. Even the spreadsheet, there's a concept of a spreadsheet, used to be like physical sheets that were spread out over a table, cut up, and people used to do it. Like there was somebody whose job that was. And that has obviously been converted into software. And it's repetitive. It's exactly the same thing. Every time you add two numbers, it's the same function. Every time you divide two numbers, the same function. So all the functions instead of a spreadsheet are determinate. AI is good at automating tasks that are close but not determinate, right? If you're creating the same kind of financial model every day, but it's a little bit different every time, right? Every company is a little bit different. If you analyze it a little bit differently, think about it a little bit differently. Analysis is, has slight variations. Um, AI can get good at that. And we're seeing like the cutting edge of that being coding is another example of something like that, right? In some ways it's repetitive, right? Everyone's kind of writing code that does like similar things, like they have the same basic blocks, right? There's like, recursion and iteration and, functions, and there's only so many things, yet there's like a huge array of different things you can see. We've all seen good code and bad code. But since that's again kind of falls in that category, it can never the AI has never been good enough quite yet where it can kind of just do it fully. It still requires the human, but it really can supercharge the human, right? So things like coding, things that are like semi-repetitive, I think are going to be like the very first things. Things that are like much more white collar information driven will be second, and then the things that are like much more in the real world will probably come last. Um, and it's not clear that it's going to get there today, although robotics is advancing extremely fast.
So you have five companies. How do you target? I mean, two of them I think are healthcare based, on the healthcare area, right? And one is what, education. Then there are a couple of investment banking and enterprise.
Yeah, it's
How,
pretty broad in finance and healthcare and education, in enterprise technology, pretty broad range. It's really where we look for are areas that are of high, significant need, right? Of where there's a whole lot of human and economic activity going on, but where the technology has just arrived. The technology has just gotten good enough to do something at that point. Because if the technology had gotten there 3 years ago, there's probably some great options already for folks. But where the technology has gotten there, but there needs to be quite a bit of work to really incorporate it into the workflow and into the business model of that sector. Because a lot of different sectors operate very, very differently in terms of um, how you can introduce new technology in there. So our main sort of competency across the board is being able to take these models and get them to work for these very specific use cases on the technical side, and then on the go to market side figure out how to introduce them so that these different sectors can absorb the innovation differently. They're all a little bit different because of in one case you might have large payments from the government and things like that sort of dictate how the sector occurs. In another case, you might have a lot of small firms. In another case, you might have a few big firms. In another case, you might have consumers. So all very very different in terms of how you introduce a new technology. But it's at that point where it's like just getting there, but you need a little bit more or more than a little bit more custom work to get these systems to really work for a real world use case.
okay, quick one on Tala Health received what, $100 million in funding commitments recently. So what does Tala do? Is that how you pronounce
Tala
it?
helps
Tala. Tala.
Yeah. Tala helps clinicians sort of end to end. So think about sort of AI co-pilots for everything from aggregating medical records to looking at various symptoms. In the U.S., for example, you might spend a lot of time going back and forth to figure out what care you really need. You might go to like the wrong place. You might wait for a while to get to different specialists or primary care doctor, et cetera, et cetera. It's like kind of a layer that sits on top of all of that and can make sure you get to the right person at the right time and get to symptom resolution as quick as possible.
Okay, okay. An- Ankit, same question. In India, what do you see? Which are the areas where you see AI being applied? Which do you think where it should be applied?
Yeah. I think again, great question, right? I'll say I'll start with a line. Uh, I think in India, AI is not mere automation, right? Again, it's far beyond that. So basically, if I see the expanse which India can benefit is probably wherever the rail goes, the data is there and need is there. I think we should take AI and the use cases there, right? Again, and if I think it through, it should be two main areas, right? Again, one area is where extend AI use cases or extend AI sort of impact in areas which are high risk, right? Which human presence is really inaccessible, right? Again, where use cases like disaster response, deep exploration, ICU trauma, all of that, right? That's the first space, right? The second is definitely using AI to democratize, right? And basically provide that support to the foundation sectors, right? Education, agri, primary healthcare, right? We all know how much gap exists in all the foundation sector. I think these are major two buckets where I will see AI for India, AI for Bharat, right? Again, here I'll say wherever humans cannot go, extend AI. Wherever expertise is uneven, democratize AI. I think that's what I will say in that. Again, if I relate it, in terms of a narrow playbook, right? Again, pick up areas which are, very, very focused with high volume of workflows or high volume of decision and queue, right? Stand up, consented data pipe, right? A lot of data is available, a lot of retention is there, right? Ship the eval to the endpoint and pilot it, right? Don't wait for the accuracy. I think have always human in the loop, right? And definitely make it fit in the whole public sector element, right? I think that's the playbook I will say. But again, I think these are a few areas or few things I feel AI could be leveraged for Bharat, right? Yeah.
And you see good solutions emerging, Ankit. I mean, of course, like you said, large volume things. I immediately thought of radiology. I mean, looking at scans and all that. That seems to be a use case that a lot of people seem to be working on, doing well. I think good solutions emerging in India.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I see again India and Indians and the innovation in India is not limited to few folks in the R&D or innovation space. Right now, as AI is democratized, right? Every sector, right from healthcare, as you rightly said, detection of a ailment, health ailment, right? May it be to sectors like cancer or even primary advice, right? To probably ill patient in remote area, to a farmer who is trying to see what yield optimization he could do, right? There are advices coming from various quarters. Using AI for education, right? Again, language diversity is huge, right? And teacher quality is a big question. That's a gap. Personalized local language tutoring is again one use case. I think a lot of good use cases are emerging, which basically is supporting the whole nation to grow.
Were
Yeah,
some of your
are teachers in India using uh, AI to cut down on their work and spend more time with their students? Are you seeing any of
Yeah,
that?
yeah. A lot of that is happening, right? Again, in various quadrants, right? Again, if I go back, in 24 sometime, we wrote a paper along with Education Ministry and is NCVT, right? How AI can be embedded right from class 8 till PhD level, stems and down stems, right? Again, this is not only limited to the students who are getting education. It's also how we can have those areas embedded for the teachers, right? For assessment, right? For tutoring, right? And how we can use those vehicles which we had, which were traditional and old vehicles like diploma, right? ITIs. How can we embed it, AI and data, know-how there, so that those vehicles can be rightly used, right? I think all of that is happening, Khil.
Yeah, Ritankar, education is something that we don't talk enough about, I feel. Are you seeing anything happening that's really interesting in the education space with AI? especially considering globally the kind of impact that can have.
Yeah, I mean, look, the ability now to take these AIs and have truly localized, like local culture, local language, local customs, and embed that into how we educate the next generation has never been possible before. Moreover, these models can learn from very different education standards. And there are different standards all over the world that it can be embedded to. And it can be, you can teach the student where that student is. Like in some ways, globally, how education is done today, what is being taught at the front of the classroom is not the level at which anybody is. It's like kind of meant to be this middle level, right? But almost no one's exactly the average student at that time. In reality, right? Maybe you are in some grade level of mathematics, but you don't know your fractions, right? If you don't know your fractions, you're not going to do algebra. So maybe you got a passing grade, but you didn't really have mastery. Now you're learning algebra, you're going to really struggle. What you need to know is you need to just go back and really master fractions, right? AI can figure that out in a way that teacher just cannot, right? A teacher cannot keep track of every little, curriculum standard and every little specific thing that a student needs to know. But AI can do that, and it can sort of make sure you have mastery, and it can help you go at your own pace, right? Someone might be able to get through the curriculum content very, very quickly. Another person might need a little bit more time on a specific curricular content and faster on the other thing. I mean, these concepts of like what is sixth grade math or eighth grade math, there's no such thing. It's just that's not how knowledge works, right? That's how we've divided it because we needed a way historically to have mass market education, I would say, right? You put a whole lot of people in a room and you give them the content, and it sort of like roughly gets to the right level of information, and like people kind of in that mass market situation can get through it. But in hyper personalized world, you don't want to ask the question of, are you doing sixth grade math? You want to ask the question of, what concept do you really know? Do you know trigonometry? Do you know fractions? Do you know division? Okay, then do you know basics of algebra? Do you know like slopes? I'm just picking on mathematics as an example. And that's not just in K-12, right? If you go through higher education, it's the same thing, right? If you're doing a degree in chemistry, like do you know your organic chemistry? Do you know quantum mechanics? Do you know statistical mechanics? What subtypes do you know? And if you don't know this subtype, we need you to get to mastery in that before you move on. And we need to move you at your pace and the next person next to you at their pace. And we can do all of that in a way that respects and helps you understand your culture, your traditions, right? In a very local, hyper local way, right? Then you might not have been able to do before. So even two regions, two provinces in the same country might want to have some of their historical uh, materials in there. And moreover, it can also incorporate people's interests, right? If I'm really into, pick your favorite sport, say I'm really into cricket, that child is much more likely to be motivated if some of the curriculum is like presented in that way, right? If and lastly, I think AI also enables you to incorporate the best of learning science concepts. So there's been decades of research into how students learn versus how they don't learn, and a lot of practices are actually against what works in actual real world settings. And like when they've actually studied it, done randomized studies, they've seen that hey, certain motivation techniques work, certain types of mastery work, certain types of instruction work, and it's never often been feasible, economically feasible, practically feasible, like human capital wise feasible to implement it. But again, AI can do so many different things, so it's going to have a huge impact in education.
Is it practically working, Ritankar? Because this level of personalization in education is something that we've been hearing about. I mean, the promises definitely seems to be, but just the other day somebody was telling us personalization seems to be working at the moment only in social media, in your news feeds that you see and all that. Elsewhere, not. Is that true?
No, I think personalization has been working. It's not widespread yet, but it has been working. There are examples in various locations where people have tried this and it really does make a difference. I mean, again, it's not just even in education. Even, for example, in healthcare, the example we were talking about a bit earlier, right? People are being given doses of the right medicine based on their genetics in a companion diagnostic. In fact, some of these medicines are being approved for use only in conjunction with a certain result on a personalized companion diagnostic. So two people have the same cancer, but might not get the same therapy because they might have slight variations on the cancer, and therefore are better candidates for different types of therapy. So AI is already beginning to enable these types of personalizations across the board. Certainly, the predictive AI nature is much better for something like a newsfeed content on a social media app, which is highly predictive, right? Okay, what is the next piece of content that you're most likely to engage with? We just need to predict that. But on the other hand, right, on the education world and all these other things, the generative content enables that same level of personalization. So it's not about predicting, right, what the math question is that you'll engage with. That's not really the right task. The task is, can I create the math question, right? Or the math piece of, diagram that you were going to most engage with, and is going to be the best thing for you to learn in this moment. And that is just becoming possible now.
But you also need the supporting infrastructure, right? When we're talking about education, for the AI to somehow know exactly which, for that personalization to occur, it does need all that data from the students. And if you're talking about like poor schools in India or something, they might not have that infrastructure for that AI to work, right? So is that also a factor?
So the beauty of all of this is the infrastructure can sit inside of the AI application, right? As you engage with it, it is getting a lot of information about what you know and you don't know. So imagine getting some content, a reading passage, answering some questions, taking a quiz, engaging with it. As it figures out, hey, you're really good at, like, I don't know, like identifying transitions or something like that, but you're not very good at identifying, different fact patterns across paragraphs. Um, it can figure that out, and it can keep a running knowledge graph of what you know, right, just inside of it. And as that knowledge graph gets updated, right, it can sort of say, okay, now I believe you have mastery of this subject, of this, curriculum standard. I'm going to give you the next bit of thing. So you don't need an external layer or anything like that. The system itself can start doing that.
Ankit, you find some good personalization examples, education, all that. A lot of people are working on it.
Yeah. So I think I'll give from the perspective of India, right? Again, what is working in education at the scale, right? We are talking about Indian scale, right? Is basically low bandwidth chatbots for the student, right, in different language. So multilingual is clearly working, right? Multilingual, I think many a time a student in remote area, probably Vidarbh in Maharashtra, Bhagakar is known to him because that's in his language, right? And that is division, right? So how that multilingual aspect of that is bringing back in the normal education, that's working, right? Again, infra is improving, right? Again, here, teachers are getting training, right? Some sort of, enablement is happening, right? But again, if I see what's not working, what is fragile is, there's still a big, equity gap, right? One third of the schools in India are still doesn't enabled with internet or with the compute, right? Teacher capacity and change management and a quality is still a big challenge, right? Again, language, dialect, depth is missing, right there. And then personalization is the next layer, right? Again, personalization is still in making, but again, extreme personalization, which is required probably from a student somewhere in a village or somewhere in a forest, is still missing, but it is improving. And I will relate it back to the cost of personalization, cost of AI, right? Again, still the cost of personalization in AI is still very high, which cannot be scaled to that level, right? So again, the big school, the good schools, they might be getting all of these, but again, the remote areas still are having
Take time.
scars. Yeah, yeah.
That will take time, I guess. Yeah.
It will take time. But I'm sure, I think as the cost of AI decreases, right? I can
As it decreases, it'll become more affordable and accessible. Yeah. Akhil?
and that's more important to build Indian native models and Indian native AI infrastructure, which can deliver that at that cost and that level what we need, right? So yeah.
Very true.
Mm. Ankit, this next question is for you. In India's concept, we've touched on a few things, but where do you see the biggest immediate opportunities for AI-driven transformation, especially given our strengths in data, talent, digital public infrastructure?
Yeah, again, if I relate it back, I think democratizing of AI capacity for masses in the financial sector is the biggest area, right? Education, healthcare, agri, right? MSME and finance for the people in the marginalized sector. All of that is a big area where we can use AI to create impact, right? And if I relate it back to the strengths what we have, the strength what we have is definitely the mass skilled in people, right? The data, right? The high rescalability. I think all of that, if we align with the innovation which is happening in the country, I think a lot of possibilities are there, Akhil. Yeah.
Ritankar, you started in 2014, you already scaled multiple ventures rapidly across continents. How has AI changed the nature of scaling and hiring from leaner teams to automated workflows? What lessons would you share with founders looking to expand globally?
Well, the last decade not only has been the decade of AI, but has also been the decade of globalization. Like you increasingly saw these very small companies from almost day one be international companies, which was kind of unheard of in the past, right? Usually you would, build up a team in your local country and then build up and build up, build up. And you would maybe add teams in other countries as you expanded to those markets. That's sort of been the historical playbook for businesses around the world. But in the past decade, especially, you saw a rapid transformation where you had, remote work combined with global talent and global movement. So you might have, teams, even a small team. You might own a company with only 10 people, but three people, in one country, three people in another country, four people in your home country, something like that was not uncommon. AI is kind of stacking on top of that, right? These tools are becoming massive equalizers for everyone, right? Anybody can, for example, yeah, the people who were great programmers before AI and after AI are not the same people, right? You might be different people, right? You might have 20 even in a group of 20, right? The ones who maybe were average programmers before, but really embraced these AI tools are now the best programmers. And whereas maybe the ones who are at the very, very top, but are averse to using it, may be left behind. Um, and it actually enables smaller and smaller groups. So certain skills become less and less useful, and other skills become more valuable, right? Like the ability to use systems and be nimble and be open-minded becomes more valuable as these technologies get stronger. Whereas skills like delegation and complex workflow management, large HR efforts, and things like that become less valuable, right? Because you can like just get rid of the layers, you have fewer layers. You're seeing increasingly very large businesses actually run with fewer and fewer layers and um, more and more leverage uh, per employee. That's not to say like that you still need very much talented folks, but I think increasingly people need to learn these systems and tools and go to where the tasks are needed, right? It's very similar to in the past with like an industrial revolution or something like that. Yeah, even in the agricultural revolution, right? People thought, oh, with the tractor, there's going to be nothing for people to do because they used to farm the land. What are they going to do now? Turns out there's always something else to do on the other side. Now, there's some complexity there in terms of what needs to be navigated, but it changes the nature of the types of people you want. It changes the nature the of how you think about building teams and scaling. And not just that, it's changing constantly, right? Even in a year from now, there might be tools that become available that can change it. And by the way, that's not just true for smaller companies or growing companies, but also for existing companies, right? Like, hey, how do you use these technologies to really leverage the people that you have? And too often, what I see is people focusing on areas to reduce cost as opposed to invest in growth. Because you see AI as a lever to do either thing or both things. And obviously, sure, you can do that, the cost cutting stuff, but the biggest value that especially larger companies are seeing right now is where they can use AI to do things that they just would never have been able to do before, right? Like maybe review every single comment that comes in from somebody, summarize and incorporate it into your and improving your business. And maybe you never had the resources to really do that, right? There are a long tail of things that people were never able to do that more and more people are going to be able to do. And I think that that's probably like the area of most opportunity today.
Your companies are typically all global. Do you quickly go
Yeah,
global?
yeah. We typically have a pretty global footprint from pretty early stages of these companies. Yeah.
Okay. Akhil?
Yeah, Ankit, coming back to you, AI adoption often demands new skill sets and organizational mindsets. How are Indian startups adapting their talent and organizational structures to build these sustainable AI capabilities rather than relying on, external tools or consultants?
Yeah, I think a great question, right? Move startup and beyond, right? Again, I'll start with some number. So in 23 early, right, first half, we did assessment on what was the data and AI skill set in India. The basically the supply and demand, right? I'll just take a supply number. The supply was around 450K approximately, and we were growing at 10% approximately, right? And then we did again assessment recently in 25 start. We reached to around 700 something K, right? So within some years, we grew phenomenally, right? Again, massive effort by whole ecosystem, right? Government, the bigger services companies, the colleges, the institutes, the startup, all of that. So I think,
And
uh,
NASCOM as well.
and NASCOM as well, right? Again, we are one of the part of the ecosystem. So we have done all of that, right? Again, I think the point is that we have grown in skill set almost like 70% in 2 years, right? And that is evident in the enterprises, the startups, right? And their capacity, right? Again, here phenomenal capacity increase has happened. But now coming back to the startup and enterprise lens, again, when we are getting capability enablement in any company, I think from a startup to a big enterprise, I think there's a big spectrum, right? Startups are more agile to adopt new processes, right? New technologies, right? Versus a very regulated enterprise like in bank, right? And I think there are big techs in between, right? Like probably big techs you all know. So that's in the middle part, right? So a startup can adapt a process in a whole life cycle pretty fast, right? Then big tech, then enterprise, right? Again, here what we are seeing a whole shift in the whole software development life cycle, right? Again, the whole life cycle is changing, right? From design, architecting, right? Coding, testing, all of that is changing, right? And definitely our startups are very much primed to use it, right? In their whole workflow, right? When they're developing. So they are pretty much up on the curve of adoption, Akhil, I will say, in terms of the new way of development, right? A new way of product development in India at least. Yeah. And then I think that is evident in global scenarios also. Yeah.
And the level of these skills, Ankit, are they really good? I mean, the people newly coming into this, what? How do you rate the levels of?
Yeah. So I'll again go with the numbers what we had, right? So in last 7-8 months as NASCOM, we have enabled around 10,000 developers in the AI-based coding journey, right? And this is across different cities. We've taken 10 cities, 5 major cities and 5 upcoming cities, and we've enabled. So in a batches of 200 to 500 roughly, right? And then I'll find a lot of resonance in all of the cities and the developers. And these developers are from startups, from enterprise both, right? But again, I think the hunger to learn new way of coding, I think, is
Yeah.
very evident, right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and the other aspect is the high rescalability, right? In the whole Indian supply of innovators or technologies or developers, right? I think that's pretty high. Uh, but again, I think I'll say that as we adopt AI in product development or overall software development, I think there are certain areas we have to be very cautious. Again, every company has their own ethos. So they have to develop their own process, own loop. There can be a generic one, but again, they have to develop their own loop, right? Instead of tool first, they have to go process first, right? They have to build governance when they are developing a software or a code using the new AI, way of vibe coding. They have to build governance first, right? Again, here, as I think, talent mix is very important. The younger folks are more, easily moldable than the senior folks. But again, I think, I find that that's again a journey, right? Again, I think these are three, four things which I see when
Yeah.
any startup or enterprise is using the new way, they have to be cautious of. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and yeah, typically the youngsters are good at this. The moment they see something coming, yeah, when cloud happened, I remember people saying, "Oh, the IT services companies are going to die now, and all that SaaS and all that will kill them and stuff." But I think they adapted very quickly to the new opportunities. Ritankar, given your experience with high value exits and billion-dollar valuations, how do you see this AI hype influencing investor behavior? What should founders be mindful of and fundraising?
It's a very good question. I mean, this is true of almost any technology wave, but certainly, again, if you look back to the dot-com era, the 90s and 2000, that era, you saw a lot of this, right? Obviously, no one can argue that the internet wasn't a real technology shift and wasn't a huge bringer of productivity. It certainly was all of that. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a whole lot of hype and overvaluation and correction and everything. So I suspect history will rhyme in the modern age with AI, with what happened in that era, where there's going to be some incredible, extremely valuable companies that are going to get built in this time period. There's going to be a lot of euphoria. There's going to be some great things that don't work out for whatever reason. And there's going to be corrections and some pain along the way. So I think everyone should understand like that is just how things are, because it's hard as an you know as an investor, especially if you're a venture investor, right? It's all about getting into the iconic companies of a generation, and it's hard to sometimes know what those are. And sometimes it really depends on how the world moves, right? A certain bet might have been correct, but maybe there's a technological shift or something changes in the market that makes that not the right direction. So but you want to be sort of focused on building and compounding value for your customers and your partners on an ongoing basis as a company operator, and know that the ascribed value to your company is partially to do with the merits of your company and partially to do with the times, right? And you don't control the times that you're in. In a moment where things might be extremely exuberant, you're going to get a benefit, and maybe you're not quite as good as them as that. In another moment, maybe when everyone is pessimistic, you might be dragged down a lot. And in those moments, you're maybe not as bad as, what others say. You have to sort of have an inner voice that understands, and you got to get that from your market, from your product, from what you really understand inherently. And you will have a very good sense of what that is. And if you can keep that, then you can sort of understand how the rest of the world is viewing and navigate all of that properly.
Okay. Yeah, there are people warning of an imminent crash and stuff like that. Does it worry you at all?
Look, I think it is likely there will be a correction at some point, right? Like these cycles typically, these super cycles typically go like that. There's like initially lots of skepticism for any new technology, then there's sort of acceptance, then there's over exuberance, then there's a correction, and then sometime after the correction, you actually end up at the top, right? You actually end up higher than you ever started. So if you take a 10-year view, AI is going to be transformative. If you take a short-term view, who knows, right? You could have some sort of a correction, and there likely will be one at some point, right? If history is any indicator. So I think, but the other issue is you don't know when it's going to be, right? That's the other thing, right? If one knew exactly when a correction would occur, they should perhaps be in that business, right? There's lots of things to do if you understand that stuff. So what you need to do is you need to just focus on your own thing instead of being trying to predict all these things. You shouldn't be blind to market conditions because market conditions affect competition for talent, competition for resources, competition for so many other things. You can't operate completely kind of in a dark room. That's not it. But you also don't want to be overwhelmed by what could happen in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. So you have to sort of balance those two things while sort of being realistic to the market and understanding it's somewhat unpredictable inherently.
Okay.
Mhm.
Ankit, same question. I mean, in this environment, how are Indian investors evolving their frameworks for valuing AI companies?
Yeah, I think there are a total, if I see six signals, right? One is the moat depth, right? What sort of proprietary features, data, what sort of, that moat which a startup has. I think that's the first thing which is seen. The second is definitely the quality of model, if they are building any model from grounds up, or fine tuning a model, right, with the right element of the sectoral, bend, right. Then the efficiency, right? How efficient, is your overall delivery, right? For the specific task, for the latency, for the tokens, right? Then is the adoption of your product, right? The status product, and the retention, right? Adoption and retention by your end customers, right? Then the next is revenue quality, right? What sort of revenue you're generating year on year, or probably quarter on quarter. And the last one, which is I'll rate very important, is the governance and safety aspect, right? Again, that's not very evidently spoken, but again, that's one of the element, because as we see, AI is getting adopted, and a lot of regulations coming in. So what sort of governance, safety parameters you are building at the center, right? I think these are six things which I feel is being seen.
Okay, okay. Akhil?
Ritankar, Titan Holdings operates in regulated industries like healthcare and finance, just like what Ankit was saying right now. How do you balance rapid AI innovation with ethical considerations and regulatory compliance, especially across different global markets with such different roles?
That's a very, very good question. And I think, that's one of the things that sometimes AI has had a hard, like technology, sorry, generally has had a hard time penetrating are these regulated sectors, right? In some ways, actually to the detriment of it. In a lot of different ways, the hospital hasn't really transformed in some ways over 100 years. In some ways, it really has, right? You have the modern technology, modern medicine, all sorts of things, but in some ways it's still the same workflow, same flow through, same thing with like a classroom. In some ways the vision of a classroom hasn't really changed in 100 years. Even though a lot of technology has been added and moved around, it's still sort of similar in some ways to what was being done before. So technology penetration in these regulated sectors have been difficult for some of these reasons that you just described. But I think AI enables a unique entry point because again, this new wave is generative, right? Once it gets generative, I think there's a whole lot of opportunity to make sure that it is within guardrails, right? Because it can also help act as a judge, for example, right? So these techniques can just generate content, but they can also read and judge the content that is coming out. You can use LLMs to see, to make sure that, hey, you never trip this regulatory wire, or you never fall on the other side of this line in a way that maybe even humans would sometimes do. You can actually reduce your failure rates to a lower level than with a human driven system, because, humans, get tired. Humans, sometimes are distracted. Humans are human, right? Which makes us special creatures. um, but these AI systems can be sort of being trained, and you can use these AI systems to be very, very flexible and look at a vast range of different things. So all of that, I think, allows technology to be introduced into these um, difficult sectors without sacrificing quality, without sacrificing um, uh, without introducing new issues. So I think that's different about this piece of technology relative to other ones. Not that, the internet or the mobile era or the cloud era hasn't had impacts on these regulated sectors, but I think the AI era will have a greater impact. And I think it will catch up a lot of things that kind of, you kind of saw this in some ways in in some parts of the world where people skip the laptop completely or the desktop completely, right? And they just move to mobile, right? In some ways, mobile caught up a whole lot of people, a whole lot of consumers to the latest in technology, and they sort of skipped a couple of generations of technology. I think you're going to see that in regulated sectors a little bit with AI, right? Maybe some of the things that some of the gains that were gotten in unregulated sectors with the previous waves of technology that didn't really fully penetrate is all going to get caught up now because of the nature of this new technology wave.
No, very interesting. Ankit, I know you mentioned it, but generally, Indian startups, do you see them recognizing the importance of, all these ethical considerations, regulatory compliance? Are they building it into their systems when they're building their products?
Yeah. So the genuine fact is, I think startups, at least in India, are so constrained, right? And they are fighting battle of existence day in day out, right? So I think I'll say out of so we have 450 plus AI startups and 100 plus Gen AI startup who we accelerate as NASCOM. Probably across last 2 years or 3 years, we have seen at least one out of three startups getting shut down, right? Uh, that's a very fact, right, of Indian startup ecosystem. But at the same time, I find Indian startup founders being more ethical and being more at least conscious of the principles of governance, right? Again, and as NASCOM, we propagate them on few aspects, right? Like in whenever they are building a use case or a product, I think have responsibility as an central pivot, not an after fact, because after fact you will have to change a lot, and which will be unsustainable, right? Again, what we propagate or what we work with them is have clear focus on few areas. Definitely, they are like data, right? Data. Be very clear what's the provenance and the consent when you are using any data, right? Build model cards. Have model cards which will have the intended use, the limits, the known risk, the fallback path, right? Have evaluation upfront, mentioned, right? Again, have evaluations on bias, fairness, robustness. Do red teaming test, right? Again, next, what we propagate or what we work with them is on having human in the loop, right? Human in the loop is very important, right? And what's the decision threshold, right? When they are taking it, right? Monitoring and rollback is very important. We tell them, right? Again, we also work with them on aspects of regulations, whichever geo they are ready to operate, right? In India, DPDP is already here, AI in Europe, similarly other regulations across the globe. I think that's what we work with them. But at the end, I think as I will go back to the same point, startups are resource constrained, right? They have that in the focus, but again, at the starting go, it takes a lot of energy to build them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know we don't have much time, but quickly, Ritankar, you had two successful exits and you built billion-dollar ventures. What guiding principles have helped you build sustainable, profitable AI businesses beyond just technological innovation?
Yeah, one thing that's critical beyond just the technology side is being able to understand the dynamics of a specific sector and making the adoption of the technology really easy, right? Understanding what segments of the market are open to new innovations, because there's always a natural entry point, and then being able to deliver exceptional value to them and finding the use cases where that exceptional value can be quickly realized with low friction. Because with any new technology, especially AI, there's a lot of skepticism, a lot of questions, a lot of pilots that fail. So you want to set yourself up for success. And you want to be a little bit open minded in terms of what the customer really needs. Maybe have very, very strong views on maybe where the technology is strong, and where the technology can solve problems or it can't. But then be open minded in terms of the customer problems, because you may not know the right customer problems in a way that the customer, until you really are in the market. So being sort of circular in that way. And also, for us, as we have learned how to do that playbook in one sector, it helps take it to another sector, even though the problems might be very different. The technology development process might be a little bit different. The meta learnings are similar, right? Some of the higher level, higher order things are actually similar across different areas where there's skepticism, there's certain, incentives and structures in a given sector that are sort of specific to that sector. And then there's sort of certain ways of solving the problem for the right types of users that ends up mattering. So yeah, that really helped us compound because we can take sort of lessons from one and take it to another area.
Okay. Ankit, last words. What steps should India's AI ecosystem take to position itself as a global hub for AI first innovation?
Yeah, I think India is right now, our Indian ecosystem is right now at a very interesting cusp, right? We definitely can, go beyond the threshold and become the global AI, house for the world. But again, I think what I feel, we definitely have to build AI first, infrastructure in the country, right? Sovereign AI is a big of India, and I think the ecosystem. So we need to build sovereign elements which go beyond the GPU compute. It has to be, the data set around various, languages and culture in the country. Definitely our own inherent models, which are not running in the race of trillion parameter, right? But again, very specific, models which are focused on social impact, right? Again, that's one. The other, point again is how can we work on, indigenous open innovation, right? Again, very domain specific, very, is focused on impact in the country, right? Again, uh, if we relate back with what China has done, China has found its own moat in optimization and whatever they are doing, right? We have to find our own moat. Again, the moat has to be a mix of the startup innovators, the R&D, labs and various institutes, and definitely a lot of coming from the enterprises, right? I think that's very important to do, right? And I feel if I see the global, regulation policy space is on the, left and right side, right? Again, now US is, promoting to build, or US government is promoting to build AI without, much constraint, right? And China is trying to drive standards, right? It's a totally different shift from what was happening probably year or 2 year back. Now India has to play in the between, right? We have to build guardrails and we have to pioneer, the standards in the globe, right? Again, I think that's very important for us. In all of these, I think bigger importance has to be given to, the product market fit of the products what are getting built, the true AI native way, right? Again, this has to be 10x better and 10x cheaper, right? The business models are built, getting built, but again, they have to align with the values what we inherent as Indians or India, right? Again, we have to keep watch on unit of economics, right? That's very important, right? And I think we have to be aware of the execution truths, right? Again, whatever you build doesn't see the light of production, right? So we have to see that, and we have to build with these thoughts in mind, Sujit.
Okay. So we can become the AI hub for the world, but we have to find our own moat. We need to build AI first infra, build models focused on social impact. And if you're building a startup, as Ritankar said, understand the dynamics of a particular sector, understand the customer problems, figure out what are open to new innovations, and provide exceptional value with low friction. Thank you, Ritankar, Ankit, for a great discussion. AI, of course, is what we are. Everybody is today talking about, and huge opportunities there for startups as well as big enterprises to work on new solutions for the world. Thank you. Hope to see you again another time, Ritankar, Ankit. Thank you.